So, welcome to CISO Talks episode 9. Today I'm joined by Joseph Carson. He's Chief Security Scientist over at our friends at Thycotic. Joe, welcome.
It's a pleasure to be here, thank you.
One of the things I'd really like to understand from you is around this topic of least privilege. So let's start at the beginning. What exactly is least privilege by your definition?
Well, the definition of least privilege is making sure that you have the minimum administrator or permissions for an employee, whether it being a user or physical access, in order to perform their tasks, or for them to perform their job function. So they should have just enough to allow them to make those decisions, to run the applications, but not too much that allows them to be able to use, for example, security controls or access to things they should not have.
Okay. Do you think that it's quite widely adopted? Where are we?
We're at the early beginning. Many of the problems was that when organizations had tried to attempt this many years ago, it was a very, too much enforcement. They turned everything off. They take away your local administrator account, and next thing you were a standard user. Yeah. And when you're a standard user in most environments, you can't even change the clock time. You can't connect to Wi-Fi. You can't install printers. So it really kind of went to the complete reverse, where it started to impact their productivity and efficiencies. And when that happened, of course, many help desk calls were then raised, and cost of the organization went up. And it meant that in the end, organizations kind of crumbled, and they decided that we're not going to deal with this. We're going to just give them local administrator access. So all of the users then became overprivileged, rather than having a least privilege approach. And that's been a major issue for many years, because me doing ethical hacking, it's my primary way of gaining access. Sure. I look for those users in order to exploit them.
Of course, yeah. Strange, because I think we've gone full circle in some regards as well, in regards to the way that we think about access as well. We think about how we used to think about access 20 years ago. Important information and stuff that mattered to the enterprise was locked in safes. Yep. It was treated with respect, whereas it feels that like we've kind of got this thing where it's just permissions have sprawled out of control. People have access to all sorts of stuff they shouldn't have access to. It causes chaos, and that's something you see yourself.
Absolutely. I mean, I've been doing this for close to 30 years now, which is a bit scary. And we've done this kind of complete, I call it the pendulum swing back and forward over the years. And what's happened more is that we tend to try to repeat the security traditional method we've done in the past, which is put more perimeter, more controls around the outside, and more endpoint protection, more firewalls, more DNZs, and so forth. And that's the wrong approach, because as technology has evolved over the years, connectivity's increased. Mobility has also become a huge practice. Organizations have moved their operations to SaaS models or cloud. So I think really the kind of approach, that traditional method no longer applies today. And going back to your methodology, of the bank or the vault, absolutely. When I talk about security, I tell organizations, don't build it from the outside in. You actually build it from the most important part of your organization, which is probably, in many cases, either data or people, or the combination of both. And the important thing is that you actually have to build your security around those from the inside. When you build a bank, you don't build it from the walls, you actually build it from the vault. And then you decide, okay, what are you protecting? What's in that vault? What's the data? What's the assets that's important to you? Sure. And then that determines what type of vault do you need. Right. Does it have to be something of concrete or something of steel? Yeah. And then you determine that, well, who needs to have access to that vault in order to make the decisions? Do you want to have that minimized to a certain amount of people, or do you want to have it broken up into multiple vaults? That meaning that certain assets, your bonds may be in one vault, your cash may be in another vault. So then you break it up, and what we refer to that as de-risking it. You de-risk your data into multiple repositories or data lakes, and then determine the access that's needed for it. You may not want to have one person accessing multiple at the same time. So banks build it from the inside out. And that's not just from a physical way, but also from a digital perspective as well. They build their vaults from the inside out. Yeah. And this is what organizations need to change the direction to.
So becoming more data-centric is really your suggestion there, you think? I mean,
absolutely. Data-centric, understand the data that makes your organization work, understanding the value that data has.
That's a big task in itself, isn't it? Understanding what the risk is and what you want to protect. I mean, that's a massive undertaking.
I think organizations probably, they've got themselves into a big situation where they've collected a lot of data, probably too much, and they're hoping to find use in the future for it. Therefore, when they do these data impact assessments, they're not really sure what data is valuable and what's not. Right. But when you get down to any core business, the core business itself is, still, relates to specific type of data. So if you're health, then it's going to be the patient data. Sure. That's crucial. And then you want to determine how you anonymize that data. Do you want it all in one big vault, which is a big risk? or do you want to actually have it separated into here's my contact information, here's the health information, and then you actually link the data together using indexes or using references or pointers. Not putting everything in one location, and then when you have a compromise, then everything is breached.
Yeah.
So really it comes down to thinking about what data makes your organization valuable,
Right.
doing a data impact assessment on that data, and then next you determine what security controls that you need to actually apply to those. You may have things that require you to be compliant, whether things like PCI, ISO, whether it be HIPAA, SOX, Cyber Essentials here in the UK. So really looking at what compliance is required for that type of data, and then apply the appropriate access controls on top of it. This is what organizations really need. That's where you need to understand what's critical to keep you going.
Yeah. So it's what needs to happen. It's just I wonder how a lot of the enterprises that we engage with, at a fundamental level, they haven't even begun that process.
The problem is that they're still looking at it from a technology perspective.
Yeah.
They're looking at it from basically systems and applications running.
Yeah.
And then of course it was backup everything. So now, because of course storage is becoming very cheap, and therefore backup everything, collect everything, and we'll figure out what we need to do with it later. It's the wrong approach. You really need to think about, well, what data makes your organization tick? And this is really what, when I talk about then the CISO's role is the problem we have is the same thing. Is the CISO role today is to keep the systems running, is to keep making sure that, and sometimes the mandate from the executive board is go solve all our cybersecurity problems, which I think is unsolvable.
That's ridiculous.
You can't, even the cybersecurity awareness person that's in organizations have been saying, your mandate is go and solve all our cybersecurity challenges. Yeah. And anyone that has that type of approach is set up for failure, because we will never solve cybersecurity. No. Cybersecurity is it's basically a space. It's an industry. It's a challenge. What you can do is you can look at a business and say, well, what is the cyber risks of that business? An understanding about who's the people that's important to, what's the data that makes that important for the organization. If that data was not available, how long could the business survive for? What's the impact financially to the business? And these are the things that the CISO should be really focusing around, is that their job is to help make sure the business is successful using their cybersecurity knowledge to reduce the cyber risk. Okay. That's the reverse approach that we should be taking in this industry.
You think the role of the CISO should be more business focused? That sounds like what you're saying here, yeah?
Yep, it's a business focused person that has very good understanding at communication. Communication is crucial. Yeah. They need to be educated and understanding about, of course, cyber risks. But they need to be a very business-first approach. Yeah. The failure that the CISO has done in more recent years is we've done a lot more pushing and enforcement on the business, saying this is what we need to be doing, these are the policies you need to be enforcing in order for us to be secure. And in many cases, the executive board are listening, but they're not really understanding about how that applies to the business.
It's not been translated into a language that's understood by the rest of the business.
Correct. Yeah. And I think the CISO really needs to probably spend, in 2019, it's the year the CISO needs to listen. Yeah. And listen to the peers in HR, sales, marketing, finance. Listen to the board, and understand. Ask the questions. What
are their motivations? What is it that makes them tick, and how can I translate this into that?
Correct. And that's basically what I see is the transition that we will go over this year and next year. Right. Is that the CISO role will become a very business focused, and their responsibility will be a business first approach. It will be in basically. Enabling a cyber awareness culture within the organization. It will be, of course, meeting compliance, and also making, for some organizations, they'll be actually promoting a security brand, helping security be an enabler for the business. Interesting. Moving forward. This is the evolution of the CISO role. Maybe the name will change over time, it's the same, but I think that the only way they'll be successful is if they align themselves to business success.
You travel a lot, so you've just got back from RSA, and you do all of these shows all over the world. Yes. Do you find the attitudes towards security differ massively depending on where you are in the world?
I think there's slight differences, but I think the problem's the same. The challenge we have the same. What we're protecting is very similar. We're protecting data, value, services that the organization's products that they're developing.
Same level of maturity, would you say, though, in terms of?
Absolutely not. Definitely not the same level of maturity. No. Some industries, you have industry maturity. And basically culture and society maturity. There's differences, and I think some of it comes down to One is who cyber criminals are targeting.
Yeah, of course. North America clearly is, yeah.
Yeah, North America from an English language, they will target English language first, and because it's the larger population that you can actually easily abuse.
Sure.
So sometimes it's also, so like any type of marketing campaign,
Yeah.
is who do you want to get first?
Right.
And
yeah.
cyber criminals will use that same approach. So I think there's also the level of education as well. Is that education becomes a fundamental part of what we're doing. Is that the earlier we educate, the more aware we make people, the more better ways they can identify the threats also has a crucial impact too. And also compliance and regulations. Also, while it's sometimes a reactive approach, organizations react to it, but sometimes they do push good practices on businesses to adhere to. So it has a positive impact.
Of course, yeah.
But some misunderstanding is so some people think compliance means you're secure. It just means you're compliant.
Yeah.